Dublin, 1881. The city's streets lay slick with rain, fog curling around gas lamps and cobblestones, a silent witness to secrets best left unread. The library at the edge of the city stood in gloom, its walls lined with dusty tomes and forgotten manuscripts, each carrying whispers of knowledge that had long been condemned. Citizens spoke in hushed tones about the librarian, a man whose obsession with the forbidden had drawn him into the darkest corners of occult lore. Late at night, the building seemed alive, shadows stretching unnaturally across shelves, as though the tomes themselves conspired to move unseen hands against intruders. Rumors swirled of the librarian reading aloud from a book known only in whispers as the Book of the Damned, each syllable uttered twisting reality and bending fate. The townsfolk avoided the library after dusk, fearing that even a glance toward its windows might draw them into the librarian's cursed world. The librarian himself was a figure of contradiction. Gaunt, frail, yet radiating a presence of unnerving authority over the forbidden knowledge he possessed. Those brave enough to glimpse inside claimed to hear whispers of unseen victims, tortured cries that seemed to echo not only in the library, but through the fog-laden streets beyond. Even the clergy spoke of the man cautiously, warning parishioners of the dangers of curiosity untempered by fear, for it was said that those who listened too closely to his readings might vanish without a trace. Haunted by his own dark pursuits, the librarian moved between stacks of leather-bound volumes, his hands trembling yet precise, turning pages stained with time, neglect, and blood unknown to any ordinary observer. Every night, he recited passages from the Book of the Damned, invoking knowledge and forces that mortals were never meant to confront, each reading a macabre symphony of terror, whispered beyond comprehension. The citizens who dared to observe described shadows dancing along walls, books opening on their own, and the flickering of candlelight reflecting distorted and terrifying images of faces long dead or cursed. Rumors told of visitors lured into the library, never to return, their fates entwined with the librarian's obsession, their lives, or afterlives, bound to the words he read aloud. Even scholars who studied the occult avoided the library, for it was whispered that the Book of the Damned contained knowledge so potent and cruel that the mere act of reading could scar the mind permanently. Streets outside the library seemed to pulse, with the librarian's presence, fog moving unnaturally as if alive, carrying whispers of bloodshed, torture, and the suffering of those who had once dared to enter. The city of Dublin, usually bustling, fell silent near the library at night, citizens crossing the street or retreating indoors, all wary of the tortured man whose obsession with forbidden texts had made him both feared and strangely revered. Those who encountered him spoke of eyes hollow yet intense, reflecting centuries of forgotten crimes and knowledge that should never be wielded, each glance a reminder of the macabre power contained within the library's walls. The librarian's study was said to contain instruments of torture and symbols of cursed rituals, mingling with shelves of books, their pages imbued with secrets of execution, bloodshed, and the manipulation of victims, living and dead. The Book of the Damned itself was rumored to be bound in human skin, its pages inked with substances that defied understanding, each word capable of invoking tragic events, cursed fates, or the summoning of macabre forces. Dublin citizens whispered of nights where the librarian's recitations caused unexplained phenomena, doors opening and closing, shadows moving contrary to the light, and screams echoing without source, all woven into a tapestry of fear, superstition, and fascination. The city seemed trapped between dread and curiosity, the librarian at its center, his mastery over the forbidden a chilling testament to the power of knowledge twisted by obsession and torture. The fog and gaslight combined to create an atmosphere thick with menace, haunted by vanished individuals, cursed manuscripts, and the tragic inevitability of those who encountered the Book of the Damned. The librarian, though physically frail, held dominion over the unseen, orchestrating fear, suffering, and macabre control through his readings, ensuring that Dublin itself became a witness to both horror and tragedy. The introduction closed on a chilling note. The library stood silent in daylight, innocuous and forgotten, yet by night it became a stage for horrors unimaginable, the tortured librarian continuing to read, and the Book of the Damned continuing to claim victims unseen and remembered only in whispers. The librarian's obsession with the Book of the Damned had grown over years, each reading binding him closer to forces beyond mortal comprehension. His frail body trembled under the weight of knowledge and guilt, yet his mind remained sharp, driven by curiosity and an insatiable need to uncover secrets that others feared to acknowledge. Citizens whispered that the library itself seemed alive, responding to the librarian's intentions, books shifting subtly on their own, shadows stretching unnaturally across floors and walls, as if dancing to his macabre will. Even the bravest of scholars avoided the building at night, for tales of vanished students, cursed apprentices, and victims of misfortune were linked directly to the librarian's nocturnal readings. The Book of the Damned, its cover bound in a strange leather-like material, exuded a presence that unsettled all who approached, as if the pages themselves carried a consciousness eager to corrupt and dominate those who dared to read. The librarian moved between shelves in silence, his fingers brushing over titles long forgotten, each page a portal to macabre knowledge, each word a potential curse that could bring torment, torture, or the sudden disappearance of an unwitting observer. Whispers spoke of nights where he would read aloud, the air thick with unnatural fog, shadows moving independently, and faint cries of victims long vanished, their agony echoing through the library and into the streets beyond. Citizens reported glimpses of the librarian through rain-streaked windows, his eyes hollow yet intense, hands trembling as he recited passages that no mortal should know, drawing dread and fascination in equal measure. Even the clergy hesitated near the building, murmuring prayers, warning that the Book of the Damned contained knowledge that could twist the soul, bring madness, or curse an entire family with tragedy and misfortune. The library's interior seemed a labyrinth of horror, towering shelves, scattered manuscripts, strange instruments of unknown purpose, and artifacts that radiated an aura of curse and macabre control. The librarian's nightly rituals were said to leave marks on the city itself, fog lingering longer near the library, canals reflecting distorted images of victims, and shadows shifting unnaturally, a chilling reminder that unseen forces were at work. The Book of the Damned demanded a price. The more the librarian read, the more the library and city were entwined with dark energies, victims disappeared, and macabre events unfolded in ways that defied explanation. The citizens of Dublin, though curious, approached the library with fear, their imaginations fueled by rumors of the librarian's power over life, death, and tortured souls. The tortured librarian, though isolated, had become a conduit for forgotten crimes, macabre knowledge, and cursed rituals, his presence ensuring that the city's nights were haunted by terror and tragedy. His obsession blurred the line between scholar and executioner, knowledge and horror, curiosity and doom, each night a performance in which unseen victims were manipulated, cursed, or silenced under the weight of words spoken aloud. Rumors persisted of objects moving, lights flickering, and books opening on their own as he read, confirming that Dublin was no longer just a city of citizens, but a stage for unseen macabre acts, controlled by a tortured mind. The library, under his stewardship, became a repository not only of knowledge but of suffering, with each volume a testament to vanished victims, cursed fates, and the tragic consequences of meddling with forces beyond comprehension. The librarian's figure, gaunt and frail, contrasted sharply with the immense power he wielded over the unseen, the dark atmosphere amplifying the chilling reality that knowledge alone could be a weapon of torture and terror. By morning, the library appeared ordinary, dust motes floating in sunlight, shelves neatly in place and silence returning, masking the horrors enacted during the night, leaving Dublin's citizens to wonder if what they feared was real, or merely a shadow of imagination. The introduction of the tortured librarian concluded with a lingering sense of dread. The Book of the Damned remained open, unread by the uninitiated, yet the city itself seemed bound to the dark power it contained, ensuring that every night would echo with whispers, shadows, and unseen horrors, a chilling prelude to the tragic events that were yet to unfold. Dublin, 1881, was a city caught between history and shadow, its cobblestone streets slick with rain and fog curling through narrow alleys. The library at the city's edge loomed as a monument to forgotten knowledge, its exterior unremarkable yet harboring horrors within. The librarian, a gaunt and tortured figure, had become synonymous with dread. His obsession with forbidden texts and the Book of the Damned consumed both mind and body. Citizens whispered about his background, Once a respected scholar, now a recluse who had delved too deeply into occult lore, his eyes hollow, hands trembling, yet precise. The library itself seemed to respond to his presence, as if the building and its tomes were extensions of his will. Objects shifted subtly when unobserved. Shadows stretched unnaturally across floors, bending the perception of those unfortunate enough to glimpse inside. Rumors told of apprentices and visitors lured into the library, never to return, their fates entwined with the tortured librarian's dark pursuits. The city, though bustling during the day, felt subdued near the library, a silent acknowledgement of the unseen horrors within. Scholars who dared investigate spoke cautiously, describing artifacts and manuscripts stained with age and a sense of cruelty that defied explanation. Even the clergy avoided the building, warning that the librarian's knowledge was not only forbidden but cursed, capable of influencing life, death, and the minds of the living. Inside, towering shelves and scattered manuscripts created labyrinthine aisles, while instruments of torture and objects imbued with dark energies lined hidden corners. The Book of the Damned rested in the librarian's private study, bound in a leather-like material of strange origin, its pages inked with substances beyond understanding. Each page he turned carried a presence, a potential curse that twisted fate or drew the unwary toward tragic ends. The city's fog seemed thicker near the library, carrying whispers and shadows of vanished victims, reflecting the librarian's ongoing influence. Families of those lost whispered that even days later, subtle traces remained. Books misplaced, sounds unheard by others, and a sense of eyes watching from empty corridors. Dublin's citizens moved carefully at night, aware that even a passing glance at the library's windows could invite misfortune. The librarian's reputation was such that curiosity itself was considered dangerous. Knowledge and fear intertwined, each rumor adding to the macabre aura surrounding the building. Scholars recorded events meticulously, yet none could fully articulate the magnitude of his power, the depth of his obsession, or the tragic consequences of reading the Book of the Damned. The city's canals and narrow bridges shrouded in mist reflected not only the physical landscape, but also the emotional weight of dread that the librarian cast over Dublin. Even in daylight, the library seemed to exude a quiet menace, a promise of horrors to those who might enter at night. The tortured librarian's figure, frail yet commanding, embodied the duality of intellect and obsession, knowledge and cruelty, and the subtle, terrifying mastery he held over the city's shadows. Citizens whispered of subtle phenomena, flickering lights, shifting shadows and fleeting sounds of whispered incantations, reinforcing the notion that the librarian's influence extended beyond his study and into the very heart of Dublin. The backdrop of 1881 Dublin provided not only historical context, but a canvas for macabre terror, blending the mundane and the supernatural, the living and the tortured, creating an atmosphere primed for tragedy, fear, and the lingering effects of the Book of the Damned. The city itself became a silent witness, the cobblestones, fog, and gas lamps holding memories of vanished visitors, cursed knowledge, and the ongoing mastery of a man whose obsession defied morality, reason, and natural law. The librarian's private study was a chamber of both wonder and terror, lined with towering shelves, each containing manuscripts of forbidden knowledge, instruments of torture, and objects imbued with cursed energy. His life had been consumed by obsession, every action dictated by the Book of the Damned, a tome whose presence seemed to distort time, space, and the will of those nearby. Citizens whispered of the librarian's gaunt figure moving silently among the stacks, his hands brushing over ancient tomes as if conducting a macabre ritual, reading aloud passages that no mortal should hear. The library itself seemed to breathe with him, floors creaking unnaturally, shadows shifting in response to his movements, and candlelight flickering as though hesitant to illuminate his path. Scholars and apprentices who had once sought knowledge there were either transformed, vanished, or permanently altered, victims of curiosity and the librarian's dark guidance. Rumors spoke of voices emanating from the walls, whispers of tortured souls bound to the book, reacting to each word the librarian read aloud. The city of Dublin, usually vibrant, fell silent near the library after dusk. Merchants hurried home, citizens avoided streets, and even the local clergy steered clear of the ominous building. Stories told of nights when fog thickened unnaturally, carrying echoes of cries, whispered incantations, and fleeting glimpses of those who had vanished, reminding all that the librarian's reach extended far beyond the library walls. His eyes, hollow yet piercing, reflected centuries of forgotten knowledge, cruelty, and the haunting consequences of engaging with the forbidden. The Book of the Damned, bound in strange leather and inscribed with unknown ink, radiated a presence that imbued both dread and fascination, promising wisdom while delivering torment. Objects within the library responded to the librarian's will. Books opened on their own. Instruments of torture moved subtly, and shadows contorted in unnatural ways, demonstrating a mastery over the macabre that defied explanation. Families of the missing claimed that even days later, subtle signs of the librarian's influence persisted. Faint whispers, unexplained movements of personal items, and a chilling sensation of being watched. Scholars documented these phenomena cautiously, acknowledging that the line between supernatural influence and psychological terror was blurred by the librarian's activities. The canals and streets of Dublin reflected not only the city's architecture, but also the oppressive aura of dread surrounding the library, casting elongated shadows and creating reflections that seemed alive with the memories of vanished victims. Citizens spoke of fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures or distorted faces within the fog, convinced that the librarian's nightly readings had entwined the living city with unseen, tortured presences. Even those who did not enter the library felt the weight of his influence, sensing an invisible force dictating subtle changes in reality, objects moving independently, or shadows stretching unnaturally. The librarian's obsession transformed the library from a repository of knowledge into a stage for macabre performance, blending the living, the dead, and the cursed, ensuring that every action, every word read aloud, carried consequences for Dublin itself. The history of the librarian, the Book of the Damned, and the vanished victims became inseparable from the city's identity, weaving fear, tragedy, and the supernatural into the fabric of daily life. Dublin, forever haunted by whispers, shadows, and cursed knowledge, remained a silent witness to the ongoing mastery of the tortured librarian, whose obsession ensured that life, death, and the macabre were bound together in a relentless and chilling continuum. Rumors in Dublin spread quickly about the librarian's nocturnal readings, whispered tales of vanished apprentices and cursed visitors adding fuel to growing fear. Citizens reported strange occurrences near the library, shadows moving against the light, fog thickening unnaturally, and distant cries echoing through empty streets. Those brave enough to glance through the library windows at night claimed to see the librarian reciting from the Book of the Damned, his gaunt figure outlined by flickering candlelight, surrounded by floating objects and contorted shadows. Superstitious whispers suggested that each word he spoke could alter reality, summon unseen victims, or draw the living into tragic fates. Families began to keep their children indoors, fearful that mere curiosity might invite disaster, while merchants avoided the streets nearest the library after dusk. Scholars attempted to investigate, documenting odd phenomena. Books opening on their own, instruments of torture rearranging mysteriously, and the faint sound of tortured cries hidden among the echoes of the library halls. Some claimed the fog itself carried voices, recounting macabre events, vanished victims, and passages read aloud from the forbidden tome. Street urchins dared to peek through cracks in the door, only to flee screaming at shadows that seemed alive, twisting unnaturally and reacting to their movements. Even clergy spoke of ominous signs, candles extinguishing without reason, unexplainable drafts, and chilling presences that could not be dismissed as imagination. Rumors circulated that the librarian had created objects imbued with dark energy, each a cursed token reflecting his mastery over life and death, victims and shadows. Citizens reported fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures through the fog, some twisted and tortured, moving as if compelled by unseen strings, a reflection of the librarian's obsession. The Book of the Damned was said to react to his readings, pages vibrating, ink shifting, and illustrations seemingly coming to life, adding a layer of horror to every recitation. Nights grew longer with dread as people whispered of unexplained disappearances, shadows following passers-by, and the city itself seeming to pulse with the librarian's presence. Even the most skeptical of observers felt a growing unease, a recognition that the library and its master had transformed Dublin into a stage for unseen, macabre events. The city's architecture, once familiar, seemed twisted under the weight of fear, alleys stretching unnaturally, reflections in the canals distorted, and gas lamps casting menacing shadows, creating an environment primed for tragedy. Those who dared enter the library seldom returned unchanged. Their eyes held vacant horror, their hands trembled, and whispers of their experiences spread silently among those who had avoided the building. The buildup of fear was both psychological and supernatural, intertwining daily life with a persistent sense of doom, ensuring that Dublin's citizens remained alert, fearful, and trapped in a city where the line between life and cursed knowledge was perilously thin. Observers noted that even objects outside the library seemed to reflect the macabre energy within. Fallen leaves swirling unnaturally, doors creaking without wind, and animals avoiding the vicinity. Citizens spoke of nights when the librarian's voice carried through fog-laden streets, a haunting recital that left an imprint on those who heard it, filling dreams with tortured victims, shadows, and cursed artifacts. Each reading reinforced the city's sense of helplessness, a reminder that the tortured librarian's influence extended far beyond the library walls, intertwining tragedy, fear, and supernatural dread into the daily life of Dublin. As nights continued, the librarian's influence grew stronger, the city's fog carrying whispers of vanished victims and cursed objects. Citizens spoke of fleeting shapes moving in the mist, shadows that seemed to stretch and twist independently, responding to the librarian's recitations from the Book of the Damned. Street corners and alleyways became zones of unease, where ordinary movement triggered glimpses of ghostly figures or distorted reflections in puddles and canal waters. Scholars documented incidents with growing alarm. Books shifted on their own. Ancient instruments of torture appeared in new locations, and faint cries of anguish echoed through empty corridors, reinforcing the sense that the library was alive with macabre purpose. Merchants avoided nights near the building, neighbors crossed streets, and even the clergy hesitated to approach, fearing the cursed influence extending from the tortured librarian's domain. Rumors persisted that apprentices, drawn by curiosity or ambition, were never seen again, their fates bound to the librarian's obsession, their spirits perhaps lingering in unnatural states. Those who had glimpsed the Book of the Damned described its pages as shifting, illustrations morphing, and ink moving independently, each reading amplifying the city's dread. Fog-laden nights became synonymous with vanished people, whispered warnings, and subtle manipulations of reality that made residents question perception itself. The librarian's gaunt form was occasionally glimpsed in windows or behind curtains, eyes hollow yet commanding, hands tracing arcane symbols, or moving over pages as if orchestrating unseen forces. Families placed protective charms in homes, whispered prayers at doorways, and avoided the library entirely. Yet the fear lingered, infiltrating dreams and conversations alike. Objects and artifacts scattered in and around the library seemed to reflect the macabre events inside. Candles extinguished without wind, books opened spontaneously, and shadows forming grotesque shapes, all evidence of the librarian's unseen control. Citizens reported an increasing sense that time itself was warped near the library. Hours stretched, footsteps echoed unnaturally, and fog seemed to thicken in unnatural patterns. The Book of the Damned, central to these occurrences, radiated an aura of cursed knowledge, binding the librarian, the library, and the city into a web of fear and tragedy. Even the most rational observers began to accept that ordinary explanation could not account for the phenomena. The librarian's readings were changing the fabric of reality, twisting fate, and manipulating both living and vanished victims alike. Dublin's architecture, streets, and canals became stages for macabre displays. Shadows stretched in impossible angles, reflections suggested figures not present, and fog carried faint cries from unseen victims. Night after night, the city's inhabitants were reminded of the librarian's mastery, the book's cursed influence, and the tragic consequences awaiting any who dared curiosity. Fear intertwined with daily life, creating an unbroken chain of suspense, dread, and the ever-present threat of vanished souls. The build-up reached a point where Dublin itself seemed complicit, its streets, alleys, and waterways echoing the librarian's power, ensuring that every citizen, knowingly or not, became witness to a slow crescendo of horror and tragedy orchestrated from within the library walls. The night of the librarian's greatest ritual arrived, shrouded in fog that twisted unnaturally around Dublin's streets. Inside the library, shadows writhed along towering shelves as the tortured librarian prepared to read from the Book of the Damned, each page a conduit to unseen forces. His gaunt fingers trembled over the aged leather, yet his movements were precise, orchestrating a macabre symphony of horror that would soon engulf all within reach. Citizens outside reported an unnatural stillness in the fog, a silence so profound that even the city's usual night sounds seemed muted, as if the city itself held its breath in anticipation. The librarian began to recite aloud, each syllable resonating through the library, bending the will of objects and shadows, bringing them to life in grotesque forms. Spectral figures, victims of previous readings, emerged from the corners, contorted and twisted, responding to the librarian's every command. The fog pressed against windows and doors, carrying whispers of bloodshed, curses, and forgotten victims, chilling the hearts of those who dared look from the outside. Books and instruments of torture shifted autonomously, their positions reflecting the librarian's macabre control over every detail of the room. The air grew dense with oppressive energy, the faint scent of decay mingling with candle smoke, as the librarian's voice rose in a cadence that seemed to summon entities from beyond comprehension. Observers described shadows stretching to impossible lengths, wrapping around shelves and staircases, responding to the rhythmic utterances of the book. Windows rattled as if the building itself were alive, amplifying the terror within and warning the city that the librarian's power was absolute. The spectral victims appeared trapped in eternal agony, their cries a chorus of torment and fear, visible only through the flickering candlelight and the unnatural distortion of shadows. The librarian's obsession manifested physically. His frail body moved with authority, commanding both the living and the dead, a terrifying juxtaposition of vulnerability and dominance. Each passage read from the Book of the Damned altered reality subtly but unmistakably. Objects moved independently, shadows elongated, and unseen victims were drawn closer to the librarian's will. Citizens outside whispered that the fog seemed to thicken with each word, carrying distorted echoes of screams and pleas that no mortal voice should utter. Even the bravest souls found themselves rooted to the ground, paralyzed by a combination of awe and fear, sensing that the very laws of nature were bending under the librarian's command. The macabre scene inside unfolded with relentless intensity. Instruments of torture shifted positions, books opened and closed violently, and candles extinguished only to reignite in unnatural patterns. The librarian's eyes glinted with a mixture of obsession, triumph, and cruelty, reflecting the depth of knowledge and the horrifying power he wielded. Shadows intertwined with spectral forms, creating visions of victims trapped in cycles of torment, their faces frozen in expressions of fear and anguish, demonstrating the librarian's mastery over life, death, and suffering. The city itself seemed to respond. The fog rolled unnaturally through the streets, distorted reflections appeared in canal waters, and distant buildings echoed faint cries of unseen victims. The climax of the librarian's ritual culminated in a crescendo of terror, the Book of the Damned's influence reaching beyond the library, touching every shadow, alley, and canal with macabre energy. Even those who had previously dismissed the rumors found themselves trembling at the overwhelming presence of the librarian's dark power. The tortured librarian, though physically fragile, controlled the unfolding horror with meticulous precision, ensuring that every victim, every shadow, and every cursed object responded to his will. By the end of the night, the library became both stage and prison, a nexus of suffering, tragedy, and the macabre. The librarian's obsession leaving an indelible mark on Dublin's cityscape and its citizens. The librarian's ritual reached its terrifying apex as the Book of the Damned revealed passages of unspeakable horror, each word bending reality and binding unseen victims to his will. Shadows twisted violently across walls and floors, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to breathe, move, and scream in anguish. Spectral figures of vanished apprentices and citizens appeared, contorted and suspended in eternal torment, their eyes wide with horror, responding to the librarian's every command. Candles flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows that danced like tortured souls, amplifying the macabre atmosphere of the library. The air thickened with oppressive energy, carrying whispers of bloodshed, torture, and cursed knowledge, seeping through cracks in the walls and windows into the fog-laden streets of Dublin. Books shifted autonomously, their pages turning as if driven by unseen hands, revealing diagrams of execution, rituals, and macabre incantations. The librarian's gaunt form moved with deliberate precision, orchestrating the chaos with a mixture of obsession, cruelty, and scholarly intent. Outside, citizens reported an unnatural stillness. Even animals avoided the vicinity, and the fog seemed to pulse with a life of its own, carrying faint cries from the library into the city. The Book of the Damned emitted an aura that seemed to warp perception, drawing attention, fear, and fascination simultaneously, ensuring that anyone nearby was acutely aware of the macabre events unfolding within. Shadows intertwined with spectral forms, creating visions of victims trapped in cycles of torment, their bodies contorted, their faces frozen in expressions of agony, reflecting the librarian's absolute control over both life and death. Instruments of torture shifted positions, appearing suddenly in new locations, as if reacting to commands unseen by human eyes. The librarian's voice rose and fell in a rhythm that seemed to summon unseen forces, amplifying the horror, echoing through the library's halls and into the foggy streets beyond. The spectral victims appeared to move in synchronization with his reading, their silent agony a testament to the cursed power of the book. Citizens who dared to peek through windows reported seeing books opening and closing violently, shadows stretching and twisting and flickering candlelight illuminating horrific visions of past victims. The librarian's mastery over the macabre was undeniable. Each passage he read not only summoned terror, but also ensured that the library itself became a living, breathing entity of horror. Time seemed to distort. Minutes stretched unnaturally. Footsteps echoed with impossible delay, and the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred. Even the clergy, who had long avoided the library, acknowledged that the events defied natural explanation, describing phenomena that suggested cursed influence and supernatural manipulation. The climax of the ritual left the library filled with an oppressive stillness once the reading concluded, the fog outside heavy with the lingering echoes of screams, tortured shadows, and spectral presences. Dublin itself seemed permanently altered. Streets, alleys, and canals reflected distorted images of the night's horrors, ensuring that the city bore witness to the librarian's tragic, macabre mastery. The librarian, physically frail yet terrifyingly commanding, maintained absolute control over every element of horror, ensuring that victims, shadows, and cursed objects remained bound to his will. By dawn, the library appeared calm, yet the city carried the memory of the night's events, a chilling reminder that the tortured librarian's obsession with the Book of the Damned had woven Dublin into a tapestry of macabre tragedy, unseen bloodshed, and cursed power. The night after the librarian's ritual, Dublin awoke to an eerie stillness that seemed heavier than usual, streets unusually quiet and fog lingering unnaturally. As if infused with the lingering presence of macabre forces, families whispered of vanished neighbors, apprentices, and even visitors who had entered the library, their absence a chilling reminder of the librarian's power. The library itself, though appearing calm in daylight, carried an aura of dread, its walls heavy with shadows and the memories of tortured victims. Citizens reported subtle disturbances, objects slightly shifted, books out of place, and fleeting glimpses of shadows where none should exist. Scholars who had observed the ritual documented the aftermath with caution, noting that the effects of the Book of the Damned and the librarian's readings extended beyond the confines of the building. Fog carried faint, indistinct cries that seemed to emanate from invisible corners, blending with the natural sounds of the city, creating an atmosphere of unease and suspicion. Even clergy who had previously warned parishioners remained distant, their prayers insufficient to quell the lingering supernatural energy. The librarian himself appeared unchanged physically, frail yet focused, moving among his tomes with the same meticulous precision. Yet his eyes reflected an even darker intensity, as if feeding upon the sorrow, fear, and vanished souls around him. Citizens described an oppressive sensation when passing near the library, a weight pressing upon the chest, a shiver running down the spine, and a sense that they were being watched by unseen eyes. Cursed objects scattered throughout the library and its surrounding streets carried residual energy, causing flickering lights, slight movements, and shadows that did not align with their sources. Families spoke of dreams haunted by distorted faces, whispered cries, and scenes from the librarian's ritual, linking imagination with reality in a way that blurred perception. Streets near the library became avoided zones, shops closing earlier, and travelers altering routes to bypass the area, a testament to fear's pervasive reach. Scholars speculated that the librarian's obsession had left an indelible imprint not only on the building, but on the very air, water, and fog of Dublin, binding the city itself to the tragic consequences of his readings. Reports of vanished individuals persisted, their absence unexplained yet widely attributed to the librarian's control over the Book of the Damned. Citizens felt powerless, haunted by the knowledge that unseen forces could manipulate their lives, shadows, and fates, creating a macabre and tragic environment where even ordinary activities were tinged with fear. The librarian's ritual had not only harmed direct victims, but had established a network of cursed influence, ensuring that the city's residents remained in a constant state of tension, aware of the presence of something beyond comprehension. The canals reflected distorted images of the library and its spectral contents, water rippling as if alive, echoing the cries of tortured victims, and amplifying the macabre aura in the cityscape. Each day that followed reinforced the librarian's tragic mastery. The consequences of his actions felt not only in the physical absence of victims, but in the psychological weight carried by the citizens. Fog-laden nights were filled with whispers, shadows, and fleeting visions of spectral figures, the book's curse extending its reach to all who lived nearby. Dublin became a city haunted by memory, fear, and the lingering imprint of bloodshed, torture, and cursed knowledge, the librarian's obsession ensuring that tragedy and macabre control were intertwined with the city's very essence. The aftermath of the ritual was profound: invisible victims, vanished souls, and a population aware that the tortured librarian's dominion was unbroken, setting the stage for ongoing horror, mystery, and supernatural dread. Days turned into weeks. Yet Dublin remained under the oppressive shadow of the librarian's ritual. The fog lingering longer, streets quieter, and citizens more wary than ever. Reports of vanished apprentices, visitors, and neighbors continued, each disappearance reinforcing the city's collective dread and the macabre legend of the Book of the Damned. The library, outwardly calm, seemed to breathe with residual energy, shelves subtly shifting, shadows stretching, and the faint scent of smoke and decay lingering in corners. Scholars and clergy documented subtle anomalies, faint cries echoing from empty rooms, objects moving without explanation, and the lingering presence of spectral victims trapped in the aftermath of the librarian's readings. Citizens felt the weight of unseen eyes upon them, a constant reminder that life, death, and the supernatural were intertwined in ways they could neither understand nor escape. Families reported nightmares, visions of twisted faces, and fleeting glimpses of spectral figures, blending the psychological with the supernatural and reinforcing the pervasive atmosphere of fear. The librarian continued his obsession, moving methodically through tomes and manuscripts, his frail body belying the power he wielded over shadows, victims, and cursed objects. The Book of the Damned, central to the city's ongoing torment, seemed to grow in influence, its pages shifting subtly, ink rearranging, and illustrations distorting to reflect tragic events, unseen bloodshed, and the tortured souls under the librarian's control. Even ordinary objects in the library responded. Chairs moved slightly, books fell without cause, and candles extinguished only to reignite in patterns that defied explanation. Dublin's canals mirrored the city's macabre transformation, fog rolling unnaturally, water reflecting distorted images of victims, and shadows dancing along the edges, a haunting testament to the librarian's power. Citizens who dared to approach the library felt sudden chills, a pressure in the air, and the sensation of being watched by unseen forces, reinforcing the notion that the city itself had become part of the librarian's tragic, cursed dominion. Rumors told of spectral victims moving in silence, invisible to most, yet leaving subtle marks, displaced objects, faint sounds, and fleeting shadows that reminded citizens of the librarian's control over life and death. Scholars attempting to document these occurrences were forced to acknowledge the blurred line between natural and supernatural, reality and illusion, as the librarian's influence extended far beyond the library walls. Families became protective, warding homes with prayers, charms, and caution, yet the fear persisted, seeping into daily life and social interaction, creating an enduring sense of dread. Fog-laden nights echoed with whispered incantations, faint cries, and the presence of the librarian's spectral victims, intertwining the macabre with everyday reality. Dublin, once vibrant, now seemed trapped in a cycle of fear and superstition, each street, alley, and canal reflecting the ongoing consequences of the librarian's obsession. The aftermath of his ritual ensured that the city remained haunted, cursed, and psychologically scarred, the influence of the Book of the Damned binding both living citizens and vanished souls into a tapestry of horror. Even in sunlight, the library radiated an aura of tragedy. Its shadows lengthened, shelves shifted subtly, and objects remained touched by unseen forces. The librarian, ever methodical, continued to read, study, and manipulate, ensuring that the city's nightmare was ongoing. The legacy of bloodshed, torture, and macabre control unbroken. Dublin had become a living testament to the tortured librarian's mastery, the Book of the Damned, and the enduring consequences of curiosity, obsession, and the supernatural intertwined with tragedy. Whispers of the librarian's dark influence persisted long after his rituals, and Dublin remained a city haunted by unseen forces, vanished victims, and cursed knowledge. Scholars, clergy, and citizens alike struggled to comprehend the full extent of his power, as reports of spectral figures, moving shadows, and inexplicable phenomena continued unabated. The Book of the Damned seemed to possess a consciousness of its own, reacting to the librarian's every movement, each page a conduit to tragedy, torture, and the macabre. Fog carried whispers from the library into streets and alleys, faint cries of the vanished intertwining with the natural sounds of the city, creating an atmosphere that defied explanation. Objects in and around the library responded to invisible commands, books opening and closing, instruments of torture shifting, and shadows contorting in ways that suggested a presence beyond human perception. Citizens reported fleeting glimpses of figures that were there one moment and gone the next, distorted faces appearing in reflections, and shadows behaving independently, reinforcing the sense that the library had become a nexus for cursed energy and spectral manipulation. Even the bravest scholars admitted that the phenomena defied rational understanding, with the line between life and death, reality and illusion, increasingly blurred. Rumors told of nights when the fog itself seemed alive, moving with intent, carrying the cries of victims and amplifying the librarian's macabre influence far beyond the library walls. Families avoided certain streets, windows shuttered, and prayers whispered incessantly, yet the city remained haunted, the cursed presence of the book and its master inescapable. The librarian's influence extended to vanished apprentices whose fates were unknown, spectral figures who appeared only in dreams, and subtle manipulations of objects and perceptions that left citizens questioning their sanity. Shadows in the library twisted unnaturally, as if animated by unseen hands, forming grotesque shapes that hinted at cursed rituals, bloodshed, and torture. The Book of the Damned seemed to record and replay events of tragedy, its ink shifting and illustrations contorting, linking past horrors with present fears, ensuring that the librarian's mastery over macabre forces remained absolute. Observers noted that the fog rolling through Dublin carried impressions of suffering, whispers of forgotten victims, and echoes of macabre ceremonies, creating an ongoing sense of dread. Citizens reported disturbances that could not be explained. Sudden temperature drops, objects moving slightly on their own, and fleeting cries of anguish that faded before anyone could respond. The library's interior, once a repository of knowledge, had transformed into a labyrinth of cursed artifacts, instruments of torture, and manuscripts that radiated ominous energy, each piece a silent testament to vanished victims and tragic outcomes. Even the city's canals and streets seemed to reflect the supernatural influence, with distorted reflections, shifting shadows, and subtle movements in the fog that could not be attributed to natural causes. Scholars attempting to study these phenomena found their work hindered by the librarian's ongoing influence. Books rearranged, notes disappeared, and faint whispers echoed through their studies, reinforcing the idea that Dublin itself had become a stage for macabre forces. The mystery of the librarian's power remained unresolved, leaving citizens fearful of curiosity, cautious of the library, and aware that unseen forces could alter reality, manipulate shadows, and claim new victims at any time. The Book of the Damned, the spectral victims, and the tortured librarian ensured that Dublin's nights were forever haunted by tragedy, unseen bloodshed, and a pervasive, cursed presence that refused to dissipate. Each event, each whispered rumor, and each vanished soul added layers to the mystery, cementing the library and its master as enduring symbols of terror, macabre control, and the consequences of obsession with forbidden knowledge. The city of Dublin, though bustling by day, was still tethered to the lingering effects of the librarian's obsession, his rituals, and the cursed Book of the Damned. Fog continued to swirl unnaturally through alleys and streets, carrying whispers of vanished victims and spectral figures whose presence seemed tied directly to the librarian's readings. Citizens reported subtle disturbances, objects shifting slightly on their own, shadows contorting, and faint, inexplicable cries echoing through empty corridors. Scholars attempting to investigate found manuscripts moved or erased, instruments of torture repositioned, and notes vanished, evidence that the librarian's influence extended beyond the physical boundaries of the library. Families remained vigilant, praying incessantly, placing protective charms, and avoiding the streets surrounding the library. Yet the macabre aura persisted, reminding all that the librarian's control was pervasive and unrelenting. Rumors spread of nights when spectral victims appeared briefly in windows or on canal reflections, their distorted faces frozen in eternal agony. Silent testimony to the librarian's tragic mastery over life, death, and unseen torment. The Book of the Damned, central to these mysteries, exhibited a will of its own. Pages shifted, ink moved, and illustrations contorted to reflect unfolding tragedies, unseen bloodshed, and tortured souls bound to the librarian's command. Even ordinary objects seemed animated by unseen forces. Chairs moved without touch, books opened spontaneously, and shadows stretched and twisted, reinforcing the perception that the library had become a nexus for cursed energy and supernatural activity. Citizens observed that the fog carried both sound and vision, faint cries, whispers, and distorted images flickering through mist, linking the city to the librarian's macabre rituals. Scholars and clergy alike recognized that rational explanation failed. The librarian's influence, the book's cursed power, and the ongoing presence of spectral victims defied natural laws and blurred the line between reality and nightmare. The library's interior, once a repository of knowledge, had transformed into a labyrinth of cursed artifacts, instruments of torture, and manuscripts radiating ominous energy, each a silent reminder of vanished victims, bloodshed, and macabre control. Even Dublin's architecture seemed affected. Reflections in canals distorted, shadows stretched unnaturally, and gas lamps flickered in response to unseen energies. Citizens who approached the area described an oppressive sensation, an invisible pressure, and the unmistakable feeling of being observed by unseen eyes, further cementing the library and its master as sources of psychological and supernatural terror. Night after night, whispers of the librarian's actions continued, blending memory, rumor, and spectral sightings into a tapestry of mystery that refused to dissipate. Fog-laden streets carried echoes of rituals, cries, and spectral movements, ensuring that even those who never entered the library were touched by its cursed influence. The librarian's control over victims, shadows, and cursed objects created a web of fear that entangled every corner of the city, reinforcing the tragic, haunted, and macabre atmosphere. Citizens became acutely aware that the librarian's obsession had permanently altered Dublin, weaving tragedy, horror, and spectral manipulation into the fabric of daily life. Each rumor, each vanished victim, and each unexplained phenomenon reinforced the city's perception of the librarian's unbroken mastery over cursed knowledge, macabre forces, and the boundaries of life and death. Scholars documented, families whispered, and clergy prayed. Yet all agreed that the librarian, the Book of the Damned, and the spectral victims had created an enduring mystery, a chilling testament to obsession, tragedy, and the persistent presence of macabre power. The city remained a stage for unseen forces, cursed events, and vanishing souls, bound together by the librarian's mastery, the book's dark influence, and the ever-present threat of tragedy, torture, and bloodshed. As years passed, the librarian's presence in Dublin became a legend, a tale of tragedy, obsession, and cursed knowledge that lingered long after the night of his most infamous ritual. Citizens spoke of the lingering fog, shadows that moved independently, and the quiet whispers of vanished victims that seemed to echo through the city. A constant reminder of the tortured librarian's influence, the Book of the Damned remained central to this legacy, its pages bound with dark energy, each word capable of altering reality, ensnaring souls, and perpetuating macabre horror. Families continued to caution children against curiosity, warning that even a fleeting glance at the library could invite disaster, a sentiment rooted in the memory of apprentices and citizens who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Scholars documented phenomena meticulously, recording spectral sightings, shifting objects, and unnatural movements, yet none could fully explain the extent of the librarian's control or the tragic consequences of his obsession. The city itself seemed haunted, its canals reflecting distorted images, alleyways twisting unnaturally, and gas lamps flickering in response to unseen energies, as if Dublin had become a stage for the macabre. Even in daylight, a subtle unease persisted. Citizens reported feeling watched, sensing shadows in peripheral vision, and encountering faint whispers that hinted at tragedies long past. The librarian, though never seen again after a final devastating reading, had left an indelible mark. His influence lingered in cursed manuscripts, spectral victims, and the very air of the city. Each vanished apprentice and citizen became a ghostly testament, their fates intertwined with the book and the macabre mastery of the librarian. Stories passed from generation to generation, blending truth and rumor, creating a legacy that was tragic, haunting, and impossible to forget. The library, now abandoned, radiated a subtle but persistent aura of dread, its walls holding shadows that moved with silent purpose, instruments of torture still arranged meticulously, and manuscripts that whispered of bloodshed, torture, and vanished souls. Citizens avoided the area, and even scholars approached cautiously, aware that the remnants of the librarian's obsession and the book's cursed influence could still manipulate perception, shadows, and fate. Dublin itself became a city that bore witness to the tragic, macabre mastery of a man whose obsession had transcended mortality, binding the living, the dead, and the cursed into an eternal narrative of horror. Each fog-laden night reminded citizens of vanished victims, spectral forms, and the presence of cursed knowledge that defied explanation, a haunting legacy that ensured the librarian's mastery was unbroken. The Book of the Damned continued to exist as a repository of tragedy, a focal point of supernatural influence, and a symbol of human obsession with forbidden knowledge. Even those who never entered the library felt its presence through subtle manipulations of reality, shadows, and sound, creating a persistent sense of fear and tragic inevitability. The legacy of bloodshed, torture, vanished souls, and cursed mastery remained, ensuring that Dublin was forever haunted by the tortured librarian's influence. The book's dark energy, and the tragic consequences of curiosity and obsession. The city's fog, streets, and canals carried echoes of spectral victims, whispers of cursed rituals, and the macabre memory of a man who had controlled death, life, and the unseen in ways that would never be forgotten. Every alley, reflection, and shadow served as a reminder that the tragic, haunted, and macabre influence of the librarian endured, cementing his story as an eternal testament to the consequences of forbidden knowledge and obsession. The final chapter of the librarian's dark legacy left Dublin irrevocably altered, a city forever haunted by vanished victims, spectral shadows, and the cursed energy that had seeped from the Book of the Damned. Even years later, fog continued to swirl unnaturally, carrying faint cries, whispers, and reflections of twisted faces that reminded citizens of the tragic events long past. The abandoned library stood as a silent monument to obsession, bloodshed, and macabre mastery, its shelves holding manuscripts that continued to shift subtly, instruments of torture arranged as if awaiting their master, and shadows that moved with eerie autonomy. Families avoided the area entirely, children warned against curiosity, and scholars approached only with extreme caution, aware that the lingering influence of the tortured librarian was unpredictable and potent. Citizens reported faint, unexplained movements of objects in their homes, shadows that did not align with any light source, and chilling whispers that seemed to emanate from nowhere, all signs that the librarian's mastery over the macabre had left an enduring imprint on the city. The Book of the Damned remained a central enigma, pages that shifted, illustrations that distorted, and words that seemed to reach out, ensuring that any who encountered it became entangled in the legacy of tragedy, torture, and vanished souls. The spectral victims, though invisible to most, left subtle marks in the city, displaced objects, cold spots, and fleeting glimpses in mirrors and canal reflections, each occurrence a reminder of the librarian's ultimate control over life, death, and the cursed. Dublin's architecture, streets, and waterways bore traces of the librarian's influence. Reflections twisted unnaturally, shadows stretched beyond physical constraints, and fog carried whispers of past horrors, reinforcing the city's reputation as a stage for macabre events. Even the bravest citizens sensed an oppressive presence, a weight of unseen eyes, and an awareness that curiosity or misstep could draw one into tragedy, echoing the fate of apprentices and visitors long vanished. Scholars documented the enduring phenomena cautiously, noting that the librarian's mastery persisted, ensuring that the city, its citizens, and its shadows remained entwined with the cursed legacy of the book and its master. Families maintained protective rituals, prayers, and wards, yet the subtle manipulations of shadows, objects, and perception reminded all that the librarian's influence was unbroken, the tragic consequences of his obsession continuing to resonate. Nights remained fog-laden, filled with whispers, faint cries, and spectral apparitions, each occurrence a testament to the tortured librarian's control over unseen forces, cursed knowledge, and the macabre. The city's residents learned to live with a persistent awareness of tragedy, vanished souls, and the potential for bloodshed, understanding that the legacy of the librarian's obsession was an eternal, haunting force. The Book of the Damned, spectral victims and cursed artifacts ensured that Dublin's story was inseparable from the macabre, tragic and haunted influence that had forever marked its streets, canals and alleys. Even in the absence of the librarian, his mastery endured, shaping the city's identity, its collective memory, and the ongoing narrative of horror, torture, and vanished lives. The final reflection of his influence was clear. Curiosity, obsession, and forbidden knowledge carried irrevocable consequences, and the city remained a living monument to the tragic, macabre, and cursed mastery of the tortured librarian. Every shadow, whisper, and foggy street reminded Dublin's citizens that the librarian's legacy was eternal, his influence unbroken, and the Book of the Damned a repository of horror, tragedy, and spectral torment beyond comprehension.